So I wanted to share just a couple of the key concepts in the Smart Church. And there's more, but these are some of the ones that our panelists wanted us to hold up before they told their stories. The first is this idea of triangulation. And it's triangles are, you have something with 4 legs, chances are one of the legs is a little bit longer or shorter than the other and things aren't stable. But something that's on 3 legs, which is my video camera tripod over there, is a very stable, provides a very stable foundation. And in our relationships, quite often between 2 people, there might be a bit of tension. And having a third person to confide in or to talk to can provide take some of the anxiety, if you will, out of the thing that's happening between the initial 2 people, so it helps stabilize the relationship. This plays out in my own family, where after a family gathering, my sister and I are on Facebook or on the phone saying, "Can you believe what Mom did this time?" So there's, it's just we blow off steam and we still love Mom, and she's not going to change, so why confront her? So this is an example of a stable triangle. It's not especially dysfunctional. We feel good about it. So we have all those kinds of relationships all the time. So triangles by themselves aren't bad. However, if you have 2 people that are in a high degree of tension or high conflict that really needs to be resolved directly in some sort of way. And so, for example, I wanted, Jeff's going to tell a story in a moment, but actually, why don't you go ahead and tell your story and I'll use that as an example.
So we were talking about this a week ago, or a few days ago, before we came here, and I had this story that I experienced after taking the Healthy Congregations of Smart Church program, which I think if I hadn't been through the program, my perspective would have been different, and I probably would have handled myself differently. I certainly would have taken it more personal, and I wouldn't have been calm, and so that was key. But I went through the story kind of thinking about it on my way up here, and I wrote some notes down because I don't want to get everybody kind of caught up in the story and the emotion of it, but really about the parts of it, the pieces of it. And so if I set the stage, this was a meeting that our stewardship committee had after the summer. It was the first meeting that we had really at the beginning of the church year. We hadn't really done any meetings or communication over the summer. And we had, our last point of contact had been our recommendation to the board on the budget amount, and it was based on a very successful campaign where we had a 20% increase on average with our leadership, our lead givers for the church. And then over the summer, we had something that was somewhat unprecedented. We had about 40 folks who 40 households whose pledge either disappeared, they either were no longer making a pledge to the church, or they lowered their pledge. And we're still trying to figure out exactly what occurred. But long story short, we ended up with a shortfall coming into our new stewardship year. And we had already been working on making stewardship an annual year-round thing, and not something that was going to be 3 weeks before the pledge campaign and everybody scramble and make it happen. So the meeting was really to talk about what are we going to do to try and offset this. We knew that there was some mop-up that needed to be done. We worked together, we came up with a plan, and I was the one that introduced the tension into the meeting, so I was party A. And our anchor presence, I'm going to call her Mrs. B, okay? And so Mrs. B was obviously anxious about it, and we tried to address that in the meeting by coming up with a plan, and that we would come back in 2 or 3 weeks, and we would see what some of our preliminary tasks, what the outcomes from those were, and then make some decisions on what we were going to do, make a recommendation to the board, or at least deliver a report. So I thought we were in good shape when we left. So after that, Mrs. B started thinking about the fact that we had a deficit budget going into this year, and kind of bundled the shortfall with the stewardship campaign. And along with her general anxiety, this woman is a very passionate humanist, and she really cares about the church, and she cares about what's going to happen to it when she's gone. And so, along with that anxiety that she had, it became they don't know how bad this is, and I have to fix this because nobody's listening to me. And so that secrecy part we talked about and gaining allies started going into action. And so it became a personal campaign to win support and to seek support from other people in the committee. And that's where Mr. C comes in, Mr. Rescuer, I'm calling him Mr. C comes in. So it moved away from the group, and it moved to more one-on-one conversation and secrecy, being cornered in the coffee hour. I got emails from committee members after coffee hour, just so you know, this is what happened. There was an effort to increase the intensity of the anxiety around the problem. And so it finally reached the point where it became for Mrs. B a time to ring the alarm, to incite panic. Making a recommendation via email to contact the Finance Committee and make them aware of the situation, and go to Program Council where all of our chairs of our committees are and make them aware of the situation. And to get other people to agree, but she still had to deal with the barrier, which was me. And so that's where it started to get very personal. And it became for her, you didn't do this, so I will. Or you didn't do this, so we will. So at this point, normally what I would have done in the past was just been reactive, defended myself. And in this case, I was calm. I didn't respond to the email for a couple of days. And then there was some more activity around the email, so I had to step in. But I was attempting to arrest the anxiety in the email. I think I actually used in my email, this is not the time to incite panic within the congregation, and we need to hear from many people before we make decisions about how to deal with the situation. I acknowledged her concerns, and I wanted to bring our group back into covenant, and to really, once we came back, I actually sought the assistance of our minister and council, just so that I could see a different perspective as well. So we did come together at our meeting, and pretty much we ended up repeating a lot of the same steps that we had when we first met. But it was an opportunity to make the members of the committee accountable for what had happened from 2 weeks prior to where we are today. And I worked with Douglas, our minister, and we brought the situation into the open, and it was the first thing that we dealt with on the agenda. And I learned from Douglas, too, that it wasn't a time to recovenant. You don't recovenant in the middle of a turmoil. And so what we did do is I had an opportunity to say what I felt happened and how it hurt me or how it impacted me. Other people got to speak, and then we moved to the business at hand. We got back on track, so we avoided a derailment. So that was an example, I thought, of what I call strangulation by triangulation. And how to try and steer it back on course and to avoid it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. So part of this triangulation situation, or strangulation, is understanding that we're all party B at one time or another. And there's times when our anxiety is so high that we feel like we need to do something to lessen it. And quite often that means going out and getting allies. And a way that Jeff could have reacted rather than responded is to start getting his own allies, and then suddenly you have a big congregational conflict. And instead what he did is he really pulled the conflict back into direct dialogue between him and Mrs. B. So there's an example of triangulation. Does that make sense? If you can just deal with triangulation in your congregation, you will probably take care of 75% of your conflict issues if you can nip those in the bud, nip those situations in the